First, Bush invades my home turf. Then he takes my pals. Then he makes fun of the way I talk. Probably. Now he steals my right to raise a disobedient, smart-alecky son. Well, that's it. Welcome to Two Bad Neighbors Live!
Wow, you guys did an incredible job of that. And there's the Simpsons theme song playing. The one that we love so much.
One we all know and love.
For those of you who have bingo cards in front of you, fuck you, Algene.
Yeah, there's your free square.
There's your free square. We are the Two Bad Neighbors. My name is Vance.
My name's Alan. There's another bingo spot for you. I had to put that one in because of you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That is my absolute favorite joke.
It's not mine, so.
I know.
Thanks for coming, everybody. We're really excited to do this. We have some guests lined up to help us chat about this episode. For those that aren't aware, probably the people who are listening to this who aren't here, because this will be released as well online, we are talking about the episode Two Bad Neighbors.
The titular episode
of our podcast.
Yeah.
How weird that it worked out this way, that our 100th episode is about the episode Two Bad Neighbors. We didn't plan this.
Not at all. Not at all. This is a stroke of blind luck by two people who don't plan damn things.
Yeah. Especially tonight.
Yeah.
Let's check my notes.
Yeah.
Good. Don't plan anything. All right. So before we get rolling here, we just have some housekeeping stuff to go through. So yeah, Greg mentioned there are bingo cards. There actually is a prize for anyone who gets a bingo at some point tonight. We have a signed copy of Planet Simpson, which is by author Chris Turner, who you will meet shortly. So Greg's fixing himself a Skittlebrow. I decided not to have that. For anyone who subscribes to us on Patreon, we did a BBBQ, which our friend Dr. Ife Abiola, he prepared a bunch of weird food for us from The Simpsons, and we ate them.
One of them was Skittlebrow,
Yes.
and I must say, try it. I won't say if it's good or not.
But yeah, so...
there's candy in that.
It's weird. So enjoy the bingo cards. It's all for fun. But if anyone does get a bingo at some point, please shout out bingo and we'll give you a prize. So the other thing I wanted to mention before we get rolling is we will be doing a short Q&A near the end of this as well. And we figured the best way to kind of coordinate that is if you have a question you want to ask us or Chris or, just in general about the episode or about The Simpsons or about Planet Simpson, please tweet at us at Bad Neighbors Pod. And if you don't like or hate Twitter, please email us at thehammockdistricton3rd@gmail.com.
Numerical 3.
Thank you. So that we will get those. You can do that at any point tonight, and then we'll check them when we're in the Q&A portion.
Yeah.
I'll check Twitter because Greg hates it.
I'll check Gmail because I'm fine with it.
Yeah, and then we'll go through some Q&A, and we'll hopefully answer some questions. And if there's nothing, then great. We'll be done early. Without further ado...
Or
Should we bring up our special guest for the evening?
The first one!
Yes.
Of the eve.
You may know him as a author. You may know him as a future and past guest of this podcast. But most importantly, you know him tonight as Chris Turner.
Author of the book Planet Simpson!
Yeah, here he comes.
Come on down, Chris. Oh, man. This is very exciting for us. I once read this. If you want to have a seat over here.
Yeah, this one over here is yours.
You're going to be here for a while. So we're going to put you on that side so that this side can rotate out.
We decided not to let him leave us for this whole hour. So.
Yeah, he's going to stay here, and we're going to bug him.
Yeah. Chris, thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure.
So for those that are not aware, would you like to tell them a little bit about your book, Planet Simpson?
So my book, Planet Simpson, came out in 2004, which begins to date me. Dating myself even further, episodes like the one we just saw used to be shown live in bars when I was in undergrad, so that's how old I am when it was first aired. The book is kind of a cultural history of the show. It was at a time just before constantly talking about television online became a thing. So at the time it was kind of weird to have like a big, long, overly kind of discursive analysis of a TV show. Publishers and booksellers, some of them were like, why would anyone want to read this much about a TV show? TV still had that sort of, just as recently as 2004, still had that bias of like, it's kind of junk food.
Yeah.
No one's going to read a big long thing about TV. Of course, this is a totally different era now, and there's an entire industry of just recapping what happened most recently on television. So The Simpsons did kind of invent that.
Do you think that's a good thing? The recap era that we live in right now?
I think it
hurts me.
I think it has good aspects,
Yeah.
but it may be getting to a point when we've got this like forensic analysis of Marvel trailers.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just going to bring that up. That's my least favorite thing that's like a thing right now. It's like, here's 25 Easter eggs you missed from the new Spider-Man trailer. Yeah. It's like, I don't care. Just leave it alone.
Also, Ezra, I think we can bump Chris a bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
That would be great, so he doesn't have to make out with the microphone like I currently am.
But he can if he wants. I mean,
Sit back and be much more mellow.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, much more mellow.
So Chris has guested on our show once before, but this is the second time we've had him. And this is your first time at trivia as well. Is that correct?
It is, basically because I didn't want to ruin my... if you've written an entire book on a thing, you should probably be good at the trivia.
Right.
And I don't think I probably am. So
Perfect.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that because we already have stiff enough competition as it is, right, Greg?
We sure do, and I totally get that inclination. It's one of the reasons I stopped coming. It's just like
because you're a quitter.
So I am a quitter, and two. I went to SAIT for a week and quit. So There you go. And two,
True story.
Yeah,
He's not joking.
thanks, Mom and Dad. My parents are here tonight. They didn't understand the episode or get it very much, but they're here because they love me and I love them. Thank you so much for being here tonight. What was I saying?
I don't know.
Okay.
Quitting? Something about quitting?
Something about quitting.
Let's quit this conversation and
Yes,
move on.
let's. Trivia's going to be fun. That's what I meant to say.
Yes,
It's
okay,
really,
yes.
It's really difficult to be like someone who claims to have like a body of knowledge and then get beat week after week, month after month at trivia. Yeah. It's embarrassing. So good luck.
Well, this was the thing that actually, when the book came out, and it did quite well internationally, and I got to do all kinds of crazy touring around it. And often when you do media, the person who's interviewing you has read like 3 lines on their sheet for that day about what was happening. And so often they would think I was some sort of deranged super fan, and they would like, try and quiz me. I was on Australian radio,
right,
competing with some guy from their their stable of disc jockeys to see if I could beat him at trivia.
Wow.
And I didn't.
No.
And they're like, that's gotcha trivia.
Your book is like this really incredible in-depth analysis of what makes The Simpsons The Simpsons. And I really, really love it. And that's one of the things you can win tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, from a plebs standpoint, the reason why we asked Chris to be on the podcast in the past and then again tonight is because we are huge fans of his book. So
yes.
We read it, long ago, long before I even realized he lived in Calgary, or at least was Calgary-based. Don't look up his address.
It's not far away. We can go back there after.
Yeah, great. All right, after party at Chris's.
I have a Springfield Isotopes ball cap. I could auction that off.
There we go. See? Everything's coming up, Millhouse. All right. But yeah, we are big fans. And yes, Greg is showing the Skittle Brow, sorry.
That's the bottom of the glass.
Speaking of, have you guys tried the Sprinkle Brow here that Big Rock Brewery has made for Simpsons Trivia?
It's better than what I just did. It tastes like a donut. It's great.
Yeah. Well, I was going to cheers you, Greg, but...
I still got a little.
Okay, great. Cheers. And cheers, Chris. Cheers. Thanks for coming. We're going to get rolling.
Thank you.
Oh, we've just been handed something.
I've just been handed some...
special news bulletin.
Some tasting notes.
About the Sprinkle Brow.
About peppermint porter. Who has the peppermint porter?
I do.
Is that what you... Okay.
Yeah.
Ingredients, ale. Yeah.
Okay.
Crushed peppermint leaves, roasted cocoa nibs, and spiced vanilla sugar.
It's that easy to brew your own beer.
Inspired by York peppermint patties and chocolatey minty goodness. That's the point.
Beautiful.
I guess. I
so
don't know.
You guys
Thanks,
can enjoy
I
that
guess.
Here at Simpsons Trivia. Big Rock always makes a special Sprinkle Brow for Simpsons Trivia, so that's the one for tonight.
Yeah.
But we're going to start talking about the episode, let's roll into it. So this is, of course, the 13th episode of Season 7. It was written by Ken Keeler, directed by Wes Archer, and its original air date was January 14th, 1996.
Man, we are just nailing this.
Yeah.
Can anybody do a quick math what the anniversary is of that? 20.
Quick maths.
23 years.
20. What?
23 years.
23
See?
years.
That's why he's here.
Yes.
Just to do math for us.
Thank you very much. There's a reason we do podcasts.
This is an interesting episode because the history between the Bushes and the Simpsons is storied.
It's just fascinating.
So for those that aren't aware, basically, I believe it was Barbara Bush, started the kind of feud, as it were.
Was it Barbara or was
I believe it was.
Was it George?
It was Barbara first.
Yeah.
Barbara first.
Barbara called it the dumbest thing she'd ever seen.
All right.
Yes.
In like a People magazine interview in 1989 or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, so like when it was new,
Yeah.
and Bart Mania and that kind of thing. And then the Simpsons writers wrote a letter to Barbara Bush as Marge Simpson and had Julie Kavner like record it and send it to her, basically being like, "Hey, we're not that bad. Please like us." I'm not going to, I don't remember the whole thing, but maybe you remember more details about it. But
basically, it was sort of a like mother to mother, please don't think we're so bad. We have our problem. It was, it was just this cute little.
it was
thing.
kind of satirical, but also kind of just like, hey, don't be mean to us. But they were also kind of digging at them a little bit. But it was mostly sweet and just trying to like quell the feud. And then years later, Herbert Walker Bush, who we'll talk about quite a bit, he said, I think it was on an interview, or not an interview, sorry, but like a speech rally, like a rally or something. He said that he wants people to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. The Waltons, for those that aren't aware, an super old TV show where everyone's super great and everything's
dying of scurvy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very much
really wholesome and dying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
an aw shucks,
Which is
type
what
show.
everyone hopes for
Yeah.
in the world.
Death by scurvy. Very early
That was actually
bedtime.
it was a campaign speech. That was
Yeah.
really,
Right.
That was the beginnings of what we now think of as the sort of culture wars, family values wars. Was George Bush? They attacked a bunch of stuff. His running mate Dan Quayle attacked Murphy Brown as being bad for America because she was a single mom.
Well, Dan Quayle's an embarrassment.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
We used to think that was a low bar for politics, and now here we are.
Here we are. Here we are.
But yeah, so on the campaign trail, he takes this dig at the.
And right after that, on a re-airing of an episode, they actually animated and recorded this quick little intro right before the credits, where they're watching the Simpsons family in universe are watching this speech happen.
Live action.
Yeah.
The live
Well,
action
yeah, the
version
live
of the
action speech.
Yeah.
And they're all cartoons, obviously.
Yeah.
And they're watching it, and he says that line, and Bart says, "Hey, we're just like the Waltons. We're praying for an end to the Depression too," which is a dig at Mr. Bush.
And it was a difficult time for our nation.
Yes.
Around that
There
too. There was a
their
economic
nation, I
hardship
guess.
going on.
The U.S. nation.
Well, Canada was also in recession, but
I
let's
don't
not
know.
go there.
Yeah,
That's
I don't-
the dullest possible.
I don't know anything about history.
tangent we could take.
No
Too bad
economic-
historians. That's
There
us.
you go.
There you go.
Bingo. Okay.
And by the way, so this is a thing where I am the old man sitting here with an onion tied to my belt to tell you, inserting a new piece of material into a show like that was not often done.
Yeah,
in fact,
exactly.
Simpsons had never done it before. It's now kind of commonplace, and I think South Park writes the day the day
Yeah.
before it airs.
They're
practically.
notoriously, they kind of do all their
But
stuff
nothing
right
was ever
before.
topical like that, so it was kind of this very pointed dig
Yep.
at the Bush administration as it was trying to be reelected.
Yeah. So that's been kind of just a season. That was I want to say season 3 or so is when that happened.
Sounds about
Something
right.
like that. So this is season 7. So they've been kind of I shouldn't say stewing, but they've been thinking about this, I imagine, for a long time.
I think it was best for them to wait until he wasn't the president anymore.
Yes.
That was probably a great idea.
Yes.
So that they
And-
could roast the new guy and he'd be like, oh, well, we didn't forget about you, Bush.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also they very, very pointedly don't make this episode political.
Yeah.
They
that's
have
true.
a lot of political references, but they don't ever, talk about his politics and how, the tax hike is maybe the closest thing that comes to actually talking about his politics. But for the most part, he's just a crotchety old man.
Yeah.
He's just a next door neighbor who's like, hey, stop it, everybody. And I think that's very important for why this episode's successful, because if it's got too political, I don't know about you guys, I would probably not enjoy it as much.
It would definitely not age as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the tax hike thing, there's the Noriega thing, which if you want to look those up, they're readily available on Wikipedia, which is wonderful. But those are pretty much the biggest ones that are also played as jokes, and they don't really ever go back to doing political humor, which makes it another example of a timeless episode in The Simpsons Golden Age, which we are so thankfully currently in.
That's right.
And we can all talk and agree on things.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
Okay. But yeah, like it's a really great idea to avoid at all costs anything that's going to date this particular episode as political. I guess you could argue that just by introducing the concepts of George Bush and, of course, to a lesser extent, Gerald Ford, that dates it. But I mean, they're United States presidents. They're historical.
Yeah, and it's not about the early '90s recession and George Bush Sr.'s economic policy. He just becomes sort of this character in the universe.
Yeah.
Who ultimately is having this sort of Dennis the Menace style feud with Bart and I think it gets at the thing that they did so well in that period, which is not to kind of take sort of easy topical digs. The one you didn't mention, by the way, which is my favorite, is the Japanese banquet.
Oh yes, of course.
Which, if you're not aware, George Bush threw up and passed out at
on the Japanese Prime Minister, I believe.
On the Prime Minister of Japan at an official function.
Yep.
While he was president, and so that was what that. It's still, I cannot think of, like, anytime I think of like someone like using a line to pick a fight, I always think I'll ruin you like a Japanese banquet. I use it all the time. It's one of my go-to lines of the show.
It's a great line.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that's really interesting is that they have, I think this might be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be the first time they've had like a real person in universe, not voiced by that person, as a main character in the episode.
As far as I can remember,
like there's cameos sometimes where they'll have one of the voice actors do the voice, but this is like Harry Shearer doing an amazing George Bush throughout this episode. I mean, obviously they weren't going to get actual George Bush come on. That'd be quite the get, but it's interesting because of that, because usually, especially nowadays, when we talk about zombie Simpsons, they have, that's right, that is a bingo thing. They have the actual actors come on and play themselves way more often than they did in the Golden Age.
They do, and it's, of course, to diminishing returns. Something that I would... Oh, did you already get a bingo?
We got a bingo already?
Oh, my
boy.
God. Oh, my
Yay,
God.
no, come on, that's great. That's awesome.
And I didn't even get to just start babbling about how great Phil Hartman is.
Yeah, we were planning to.
I've been waiting to do.
We were definitely going to
start rattling through
there.
some of the things.
I want to open this though,
well, that's a good time.
Yeah.
So Christy is the winner of the bingo.
Yeah.
So we'll get you your prize shortly here, Christy. But she also gave us a gift.
This is going to be terrible on the podcast. But
this is going to be great for the listeners.
I'm going to describe it. It's wrapped.
We decided we wanted to open it on stage.
It's Santa Claus type wrapping. It's got a bunch of reindeers on it. So reindeers or reindeer?
I think it's just reindeer.
Just reindeer?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like deer. You don't pluralize deer.
Right. What do we got? It's a DVD of some
DVD.
kind.
It's a movie.
It's
oh my God! Is it? Give me it.
It's Pocahontas and Pocahontas 2.
Amazing. Christy, you're the one who organizes like the bad princess parties or whatever, right? Yeah. So Christy has written into us before and told us about these, and we've talked about it on the podcast. And I think we talked at length with Camille about Pocahontas 2.
Yeah. Speaking of.
So, that's a good segue. Let's bring on our first rotating guest.
Yeah, it's Camille Pavlenko, ladies and gentlemen.
Actress, improviser, but most importantly, past and future guest on this podcast. So we're going to start talking about the episode itself, kind of talk about Act 1, which, if you don't follow the act structure obsessively like I do, it's basically from the beginning until George Bush arrives. So, the rummage sale, all that kind of stuff. Welcome to the show, Camille.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming. So, Camille, is this the first time you've seen this episode?
No, I did. I haven't seen it in a very long, 15 plus years, though.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And what were your some general thoughts?
I just wanted to make it a nice round number. Greg.
Wow, that's so long.
It
that
wasn't a favorite, so.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I never understood probably most of the references. I remember distinctly thinking, now this guy's probably a real person, but I was on the fence whether he was fictional or not. Like George Bush.
George H.W. Bush, yeah.
Yes.
No, that's fair.
That's a great way to approach this episode. Just imagine that Bush is fictional. I think that's really funny.
I was 50-50 at the time as a 7-year-old. So
I was going to say,
His
96,
son was
so...
president at that time. Would he not have been if we're going back about 15 years?
not at the time of this episode airing.
No,
Oh, no,
when
when
you're talking about
15 years ago, yeah.
Oh, I don't. Well, I think I saw a rerun at some point.
wow.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, so what are just some general thoughts about the episode on this rewatch, I guess?
Mixed, because I understood it much more as an adult, but not fully, and that was upsetting. I'm like, oh, there's still references I don't get. I'm not a well-rounded person. No.
Hey, what didn't you get?
No, I don't want to say.
Okay.
Lots of little things.
Yeah. No, there's lots
of
that I didn't
small-
get either.
Okay.
I mean, for this podcast, I researched the stuff I don't get and try to bring that up in the reference desk, which we'll get to near the end, but we can obviously pepper them throughout the podcast as well. So, but for this act, so this first act is, pre George Bush arriving, and it's all kind of set up. We have the rummage sale as kind of the centerpiece of this episode. Has anyone ever done a rummage or gone to a rummage sale? I feel like it seems like some audience members. Yeah, I meant the panel mostly, but that's great to know as well. No, I'm not trying to disclude you. I was curious to hear some thoughts from.
No, my block here in town has one every year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and the whole block, and it is very like
It seems like such a foreign concept to me,
Yeah.
and I mean I knew garage sales, but like rummage sale, it's like where the whole neighborhood kind of comes together and everyone tries to sell stuff at the same time.
Oh,
Just-
okay, so this is a multi-house yard sale.
Yes, it's the neighborhood. That is the kind of that's why there's
Why
the
don't
different
they call
tables.
it a neighborhood sale?
Well, it doesn't really roll off the tongue as well.
Or a
Rummage
block
sale?
party.
A block party? That's a different
a
thing.
block sale.
Is it a different thing? I've
Yes.
sold things at a block. People told me to stop.
Well, that's why.
That makes sense.
I think if you said
Do you want
block
some
sale,
Tic
people would
Tacs?
not know
Yes.
what you were selling.
That's true. Yeah.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the Tic Tac Corporation. When you need to take a tack. Tic Tac, your next treat.
Take a tack. Yep.
Thank you for
That's
doing that.
that old slogan.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. Camille actually brought me these wonderful yellowhead Tic Tacs from Italy. Was it? Yeah, they've been around for quite some time. Do you guys want some Tic Tacs?
Go well with
Sure.
some Skittlebrow.
Yeah.
They taste like Buzz Cola, actually. You want a Tic Tac?
Sure.
Yeah, you do.
If it tastes like
Feel
Bush Coke,
yeah, you'll
oh,
feel instantly younger.
I promise it tastes like Buzz Cola.
Why did you say it like that?
No reason.
That's terrifying. So this rummage sale,
Yeah.
I just want to talk a bit about. So first of all, Ned is going around with like a little microphone and like narrating it. Is that normal at a rummage sale?
I think it would have been in the 1990s,
Okay.
maybe. I guess no.
No,
I don't
the
think
answer's
that's
no.
a standard part of the rummage.
All right, might just be
package. I think
Ned's
that
little thing.
They wanted to get to the presumably had decided on the gag with Disco Stew and then kind of built it backward from there.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
like a Marvel action scene. They build the story around it. Like it's
No.
like we have to have this city fall down, and let's build around that.
I don't even know if that's true. I just wanted to talk about Disco Stew.
Oh, we're going to talk about Disco Stew.
Marvel movies are made around what cities fall down. That's their motivation.
I can only assume cities fall down a lot in those movies.
Okay.
Like,
I can think of one city.
I can think of two.
All right. Anyway,
Sokovia, New
we're not
York.
here to
They're
talk
both
about
That
Marvel.
sounds like something the Cinepals could confirm.
Oh boy. That
Thank
is
you. You're
not
just-
no, we're not doing a tangent.
You're just bouncing off all of these bingo
trying to- I got
spots. This
excited.
whole
Now
time.
it's just for bragging rights because the winner's already been declared.
Oh, that's right. There aren't multiple prizes.
No,
Well,
we
they're-
didn't think it would happen so quickly.
We honestly didn't think that. Yeah, we didn't think it would even happen. But keep doing it. If you do win, bring it to me. I'll give you a prize.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a nice guy.
Yeah,
I
that
won't.
was our first prize over there. If it eventually comes around to like there's more people, I will personally give you a prize.
Cool. We could do like blackout too.
I promise. What's
Blackout
right.
bingo. You have to fill all the squares.
Right, blackout bingo.
I don't know if we'll get that far.
Maybe. We'll see.
Disco Stew.
Yeah.
So this is a great joke that led to one of my least favorite characters on the show.
Agreed.
It should have remained a one-off joke.
Well, we have an audience here. Show of hands or applause. Who likes Disco Stew? Okay. Who likes Disco Stew after this episode?
Couple applause.
Okay,
couple
a few.
smattering.
A few.
How many people don't care?
So many. Well, We do.
Well, yeah, that's why we're here.
I think you might even be able to trace, like, I think if they don't have it already, I'm giving another square. You could trace the decline from Golden Age to Zombie Simpsons by how tedious Disco Stew gets.
Yes.
And I think he actually works for a couple more times.
Yeah,
It's fun that he comes back.
Yeah, the couple little like cameos, as it were.
He's wearing the platform shoes with that goldfish.
Right,
in them
yeah.
At the
the expo, I believe.
Yeah.
When he's
mean,
like,
that's still fun,
look at
but
the
then-
disco music. It's going up till the 70s. If that continues, hey.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
didn't.
once they get to the point where it's every time there's an ensemble, Disco Stew is part of it. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Well,
fun.
and once they get to like episodes revolving around Disco Stew, I think there's one where he like tries to marry Marge or something. I don't know. It's
Weird.
It's stupid.
What do you think
Anyway,
of Disco Stew?
I think I'm neutral overall. I thought positively when he was in the when we were rewatching this episode and Homer pulls out the jean jacket with Disco Stew. I'm like, that's an obvious joke. Until I realized, the character hasn't existed until probably this scene. Oh, that's
Yeah.
much more funny then.
Yeah.
I'm like, I see where you're going with this. But
It's,
again,
so you thought it was like after?
I
Like,
thought he'd already
yeah.
been introduced.
that was that's very similar to me knowing that Maggie shot Mr. Burns before I even saw the episodes.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, excuse me for a 25-year-old
spoilers for
episode.
Who Shot Mr. Burns.
Yeah. But yeah, and when Phil Hartman says, then they found out it was the baby, that was in the 138th episode Spectacular. That's the first time I knew about Who Shot Mr. Burns, and therefore it was ruined for me. And this is the first time you see Disco Stew, but if you, of course, were like me or you who watched it on syndication a lot,
Yeah.
you probably would have been spoiled by several different episodes.
It's true.
Yeah. And so when Homer takes out that jacket, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but now I feel pretty neutral about him. I also remember, I guess the only other main Disco Stew moment I remember is the dead goldfish in the shoes.
Yeah. Because that's shortly after this. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's fine.
He's fine. That's where we're settling on it. Completely down the middle. Stu's fine. He can stay, I guess.
It's just for me, it's just one of those things where like the more it's perpetuated, the less funny the original joke becomes. For anyone who heard my rant on Boo Earns and how I hate how that joke is just in culture now, it's one of the funniest jokes on the show, and I hate it now because of the way culture has co-opted it. It's kind of like Disco Stew. Where
They play it at hockey games now.
Booer.
Yeah, they do a Boo
do they
Earns
do
thing.
it as a celebratory thing? Because it's supposed to be
No, they
celebratory.
don't.
Then they're idiots.
Yes.
All right. Sorry. That's listen to the other episode, the
Given
Stars
that
Burns
this
episode.
podcast might have a life of its own and might one day reach, all the way to whoever is in charge of Frankiak.
Yeah.
Frankiak, in my opinion, misspells Booerns.
Oh, really?
On several occasions, I've tried, like on Slack, you can query Frank.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I assumed it was BOO-Earns.
Right.
It's BUU-Earns, which makes
Huh.
no sense. And I had to I shouldn't go into the process by which I determined that. But anyway, if the Frankiak people are out there listening,
Yeah, Frankiak.
spelled Boo-Earns.
Get it together.
It's clearly BOO-Earns.
Yeah, we all know it.
I have a question for you, Camille. Have you ever, in your travels, run into somebody like Mrs. Glick?
Is that old lady?
$90.
Is that old bitch? Can I swear on the podcast?
Of course you can. The very first thing I said was "fuck you, LG."
Oh, okay.
That's true.
I
That
wasn't
is
sure That
true.
was part of it.
We got explicit
yeah.
rating
Yeah.
on iTunes.
I feel like she's very similar to. I had a piano teacher named Mrs. Merle, and she lived in this horrible apartment building in Lethbridge that always had those maple bugs. There were like clouds of them.
Oh,
in,
gross.
Like the foyer where you have to beep to get up to the apartment, but she would take so long to get to the beep that they would just be swarming. And she was a lot like that. Like she had a lot of candy dishes and like things that you couldn't touch.
Just
Candy dish.
just that's so true of so many of so many houses that you go in where like people have like things just so. It's like this is where the candy goes. Then that's
it's a
it.
candy dish.
That's it. It is just for candy.
And it's $90.
Yeah, and it's like, can I take a candy? No. Otherwise, there won't be any candy in it. You can't. No.
Well, and Mrs. Glick in one of her previous appearances has, a candy dish, and he tries to take one, and they're all stuck together. And that's very,
It's very telling.
yes. I'm sure I've met a
remember
woman like
phenomenon,
that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like trying to take like
And
ribbon
it's,
candy.
and it's all,
Remember
they're all
ribbon
slightly
candy?
melted, so it's like, oh, no thanks. I'm good. Mrs. Glick is great. And also, what does Ned say at the he's like, if you want an artificial tree, trunk only.
That just makes me think of like a Christmas that went wrong.
Yeah.
Like, how would we get to an artificial tree trunk only?
The trunk has been saved, but the leaves, as it were, have been burned.
Was it perhaps a situation like the time when Bart burned the tree down?
Yeah,
Perhaps.
that's what I was referencing.
And it's like snow covers all, snow covers all, snow covers all until it melts.
We'll never know for sure.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
But of course, so Ned is, narrating this, and very quickly Homer, as is his wont, gets very upset at Ned for no reason, because he's boring.
He's so mean, but everyone seems to be on board.
Yeah, he's the king of the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Which also, I just want a slight tangent, but like, all of those characters live in this neighborhood? Is that what we're to believe?
That always bothered me about this episode. Everyone in Springfield lives in Evergreen Terrace. They might as well just call it Evergreen Terrace.
Or the rummage sale is just so like legendary in Springfield that everyone comes to it.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
This is such a great rummage sale that not only does everyone come to it, it changes.
You got candy dishes.
It changes the geography.
Ayatollah shirts.
Incidentally, my favorite gag in that whole first act is the one guy in the audience. He thinks he's better than America. Is he right? And, and the one guy goes, yes.
Yes.
I love that. They use that gag several times in the show, and it works every single time. Anytime there's an audience where everyone agrees and one guy goes,
well,
yes.
Well, what was in Last Exit to Springfield?
absolutely,
Yeah, one of the great episodes of all time.
That little old guy. He's like, no,
Yeah.
nay.
Do we all agree? Nay.
Nay. It was him. Let's get him, fellas.
Well, I think probably everyone comes to the rummage sale because they're like, oh, we live elsewhere in Springfield, but that Homer family lives there, and something interesting always seems to happen every week. So let's go see.
Every
what
major
happens
event in
there.
our lives revolves around them in some way.
So let's go be at that.
That's
and they were
fair.
Right.
Yeah, they were. They were. George Bush showed up.
Yeah.
Didn't really have much to do with The Simpsons. Homer sure made it about himself.
Well, yeah.
But that's the whole point.
I can attest, by the way, right here in Calgary in the year 2018, 2019, you have a full block rummage sale like we do on my block. People honestly do come from all over. Not only that, they show up early to try and get the best deals. And so, like there is a whole subculture out there.
That's true. Yeah.
Garage sale and yard sale obsessives.
Coupon hunters. What do they call them?
Yeah, it's the same idea.
Rummage enthusiasts.
Sure.
Yes.
Or REs.
That's the REs for short. They are registered in a tax bracket.
But so to kind of wrap up this act, because we want to keep moving here, Homer is basically showing his cards early on in this episode how he wants to be the center of attention. And so when Bush moves in, it's very quickly, he's already against him because he's like, who's this guy, showing me up? Mm-hmm. And this is the first time we see this giant house across the street, which I remember in like video games, they like kept that as like a thing in like hit and run and stuff like that. That house is still there.
It sure is.
Oh.
Camille, what's your favorite joke in this episode?
Does it have to be from my act?
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
No.
Great. Okay, I had a couple written down on the back of my bingo card, but I think my favorite is when he's in line in the drive-thru at Krusty Burger. Is like a crusty burger, and that doesn't sound very good. What kind of stew do you have today? This is exactly how my dad orders in a drive-thru, so I very much relate.
How similar
really enjoy
is
that.
George H.W. Bush to your dad?
Frighteningly so. As I rewatch this, I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. And there's 10 cars behind. I'm like, just order it. And he's like,
Let me have one of your...
What's on the Whopper?
Does he actually
Whopper?
ask what's on the Whopper?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, boy.
Does it sound very appetizing?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have two very quick questions
Sure.
before I skedaddle here. So during another act, we have, of course, the banner that's revealed. That's two bad neighbors.
Yeah.
So if the bad neighbors in the episode are Homer and Bart, I don't know if you've already answered this. So of the you two, Greg and Alan, who is the Homer and who is the Bart?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean...
Say your answer in 3.
Of what, like who you are?
Yeah, who you think you are and who.
Okay.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1. Bart.
Homer.
Oh!
There it is. I mean, you're a little scamp. You're a little Rudiger.
I'm a
like-
little stinker.
Rudiger.
Please
Yeah.
call me Rudiger, sir.
You wait 100 episodes for these kind of revelations.
That's right.
Yes,
yeah. There you go.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, and I have one other very tiny question. It's my own micro reference desk for this episode, like for the Two Bad Neighbors episode. So etc. Chris, earlier you mentioned having an onion tied around your belt, and I just want to know what that means. I mean, I understand contextually what that means, but I really want to know the origin of that. I have never heard that term or expression before.
I'd be happy to, because it refers to one of the all-time great moments in the history of the show. Also, strike episode, which
Last exit to Springfield.
If you read Planet Simpson, whoops, upside down. Planet Simpson, you will hear it declared the best episode of all time. And I did that before Entertainment Weekly made it cool. Damn it.
It's true. I remember.
In that show, in that episode, the power plant goes on strike, and Mr. Burns attempts to bring in strike breakers, and it's basically Grandpa Simpson and his friends from the Springfield Retirement Castle, and Grandpa Simpson, in explaining their plan to Mr. Burns, says, we can't crack skulls the way we used to, but we have other ways of doing this. One way is to tell them stories that don't go anywhere, and then he launches, I won't do the whole thing, but he launches into this long, elaborate story about going to Shelbyville. Why is he going to Shelbyville?
Something about his boot?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he had an onion tied to his belt.
Yeah.
Which was the style at the time.
Yeah.
So he explains that he had an onion tied to his belt because that was stylish in whatever
time
he's referring
yeah.
to, which was also a time when quarters had pictures of bumblebees on them. And there's a whole lot going. It is one of the great Grandpa Simpson moments of the entire show. It's run and the onion tied to my belt is in some Simpson circles is just like that is how you
declare you're
shorthand
old.
say I'm an old guy talking shit.
Yeah.
Perfect. Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very appropriate right this instant for me. So that worked. I like how that came full circle.
Well, I think it's about time to move on to Act 2.
Let's do it. Thanks to Camille for joining us.
Thank you so much, Camille.
Woo.
Thank you so much. I'm 1,000% positive she'll be on another episode very soon.
I mean, she does live with you.
She does live with me. It's super
It's really easy to get her on.
I basically am like, Camille, I couldn't get a guest.
She's guested on ones where we didn't plan for her to guest.
That's true.
She just comes barging in. We're like, what are you doing? She's like, hi.
It's one of my favorite things. Okay,
our next guest, you may know him as a doctor.
He's
you may
an
know
entrepreneur.
him as an entrepreneur. But most importantly, you know him as a past and future guest from this podcast, Dr. Ife Abiola. And he's making a bold statement with his shirt choice tonight.
Well, he is a doctor.
Well, doctor of what?
Doctor of withdrawing my question.
So we head headlong into Act 2, where things begin to escalate, and we get into a full-blown, I think we would all agree, extended parody of Dennis the Menace.
Correct.
And Mr. Wilson. Did any of you see that movie when it came out?
Oh, yes.
With Walter Matthau and Christopher Lloyd as the evil hobo?
Which, fun tie-in, those that don't know, Dan Castellaneta based his voice of Homer on Walter Matthau, so...
That's true.
Yeah. Originally. So, when you watch the original shorts, when he's like, frosty chocolate milkshakes.
Everyone
that's
down
Walter
to the Fallout
Matthau.
shelter.
But now, obviously the voice evolved, and it doesn't really sound like Walter Matthau anymore, but that's what he based it on. But yeah, the movie was bad.
It was very bad. Very bad. Very bad indeed. I honestly thought the kid was Macaulay Culkin. I was sorely mistaken.
Absolutely not.
It was very much not
Mac
Macaulay
would not
Culkin.
do that.
Yeah.
He is a good man.
Mac. You're on a first-name basis with Macaulay Culkin.
I think I brought this up before about how the My Girl tagline, the movie My Girl, which came out after Home Alone, the tagline is just, Mac is back. Because that's all they were banking the marketing on was, you like Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone? Here he is again. Dies by bees.
Dies by bees.
Spoilers for My Girl from 1991 or whatever.
It's very, very sad.
It is sad.
Allegedly.
That's a great movie.
Okay.
Anyway, that's a Cineballs tangent. There you go. Wow. Ife,
Yeah.
welcome to the show.
Thank you. No,
What'd you think of the episode in general? I know you well enough to know that you've seen this episode many times.
Yes.
So, what about this time? Anything special jump out at you?
Like you had said, how apolitical it is. I think that's a big feature of this whole thing. But what just gets me a little more every time I watch this episode is how terrible of a person Bart Simpson is.
Yes, okay. I'm glad you brought this up because I was going to bring it up if you weren't. Ife is notoriously known in this podcast as hating Bart Simpson.
He's very anti-Bart.
Yes, which is why this is a great episode.
It's an opinion. It's fine. I'm mostly telling that for myself.
Yes.
Because he's an underachiever and proud of it. What's not to like?
Oh.
Rex things. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. He's a Rudiger. You know, Greg is the
spark.
Bart, so...
He has a spark. Marge is very
And he
clear
uses
on
it for
this.
arson and things like that. He's terrible. He's a bad kid.
Arson, vandalism, other petty crimes.
Yeah, you know, usual
Real
10-year-old
money's in
stuff.
bootlegging.
Oh, right.
So George Bush was right in the episode.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That boy of his.
That boy of his, yeah.
Yeah.
No discipline from Captain Wacky.
Well, let's go over. Let's go over
Later renamed Homer.
some of the quote-unquote horrible things Bart does in this episode. One, he comes over to George Bush's house uninvited. Very rude.
Yeah, how dare he?
Yeah. Two, he messes up his playing cards with his electric shuffler. They only give you so many packs.
Yeah.
Three, he wakes up George W. Bush using
With his alpine horn.
His
But the
alpine horn.
clock says 3:19. Why is he
Is that-
asleep?
It's his,
He's an old man.
an
He goes
old
to bed
man.
at 2.
Oh.
2 p.m. and then up nice and early at 11
He
p.m.
was 94 when he died. He was already super old in 1996.
That's true.
That's why he was asleep at 3:20.
3:19.
Yeah,
That is definitely not something I noticed.
Me
is the
neither.
clock.
I would
so,
not have-
good work, Ife.
I would not have bothered, but that's very nice.
These are the kind of details you expect from this podcast.
especially a doctor.
Yes.
Yes.
He messes up his memoirs. However, it's not on purpose.
Well,
It looks to me like the motor is the one that
It's-
it has its mind of its own. It aims right for it.
I highly believe that Ife is actually very much right in this particular episode. Bart's a little shit and deserved to be spanked.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Like the memoirs fall. Like he's specifically told not to touch the lawnmower. He pulls the cord, and then Bush says, "Don't touch it again," and he kicks it, and it does it again. So
I like to compare former President Bush to Frank Grimes in this.
I wasn't gonna do that. Yes,
Because
yes,
he's playing off this like the same way that Frank Grimes did for Homer. He's doing it for Bart.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm just an outside character. Wow, this kid is straight out of the devil's balls or something. He's crazy. So yeah, it's the same thing.
So I was gonna bring this up with the panel here. I did notice there's a distinct parallel between George H.W. Bush and Frank Grimes in the fact that he should be like a normal outsider,
Right.
but his exposure to The Simpsons brings him down to The Simpsons level, or that's definitely what happens with Frank Grimes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or is The Simpsons in this trying to just expose? Is it like used to expose Bush for who he really, really is?
I think it's more the latter. I think that the Frank Grimes episode, which is coming up season 8, we'll talk about it more at length, but that's very much, this is a normal guy who's just trying to do his job and just a normal American who's like, come on, I just want to live my life. And Homer drives him to suicide.
Yes.
To insanity and suicide. And this is more just, this former president who thinks he's, the greatest president.
He makes fun of the way you talk.
That's probably.
Oh.
He just can't handle the antics of Bart, particularly. And, Homer and his feud is more about both of them having large egos.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The other thing too, though, is I think like with Frank Grimes, I think and I mean just for the record, I think the writers have kind of been forthcoming on this. The intention was to demonstrate that Homer, though he was this beloved hero, was actually a terrible person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like there was this sort of, it's interesting because this is happening right now with the whatever anniversary it is of The Sopranos and
20, I think.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And David Chase
99.
has been talking in interviews like he did not intend for his main character to be that sympathetic, but people kind
Right.
of love Tony Soprano.
Well, and
Similarly-
he birthed the anti-hero character,
Similar-
Breaking Bad.
Similarly, Homer's supposed to be kind of terrible, and they were exposing that. Whereas I don't think you're supposed to empathize with George H.W. Bush very much. You're supposed to think, what a
stuffed shirt,
what a
yeah.
hysterical old
Yeah,
man.
yeah. It's less of like
And you're saying he has every right to be an
Absolutely.
hysterical, yeah.
It exposes how awful he is because you say, especially as you get older, like I would act the same way. Like someone needs to curb this young child. So,
well, that's where we disagree. I feel Bart is just being a 10-year-old kid, and you're in for a rough awakening if you ever have kids, Ife.
Can we talk a little bit about Barbara Bush in this episode?
Yes, we can.
She's
She's
wonderful.
making rice, and it'll be a while.
It'll be
Yeah.
a while. Yeah.
Barbara Bush is wonderful.
I love Barbara Bush in this episode. She's so funny. She has one of my favorite lines in the episode, which is, "I'm not getting involved, George." And she is just she's the sympathetic one,
Yes.
I think. She presents herself as reasonable, as sympathetic, very much the counterpoint to Marge.
Sure.
The scenes that they, like the very few moments that they share with each other, I'm like, this is very much like that little letter that they wrote back and forth. Find it online. It's very fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I like I said at the beginning, how like Barbara Bush arguably started this feud, and then the writers, arguably take the high road by not ever like taking a dig at her at all. In fact, making her one of the best reasonable characters in the episode. And I just love how, like I think the telling part of the episode of how George and Barbara both deal with Bart is when he says, "Do you have, or can I have some candy?" And Bush's reaction is, "No, go away!" Like very mad to a child asking for candy. And then Barbara's just like, "Nah, most old people don't eat candy, but I'll bake you some cookies." Like she's very nice and just like
to a child that just shows up in your home.
Yeah. Well, your neighbor, Ife, again.
It was a different time.
Again, rude awakening coming for Ife.
Incidentally, and I have no idea how overt this was, but like the degree to which they've cast Barbara Bush against type, because
Yes.
Barbara Bush is famously like absolutely steel-nerved. She was the reason the Bush dynasty existed politically.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
pulling all the strings behind the scenes, and they've created her as this kind of like the matronly.
You're right, and that might be a dig in like a very sneaky way, but I still like that they went that route.
In these first two acts, the only thing I find that Homer actually has to do, really, other than do the block party thing, which is, rummage sale.
Thank you.
Is to figure out an excuse to go to war with George Bush.
Yeah.
That's really his entire arc of this particular act. Is he's trying to
He looks up him in the
he thinks
encyclopedia.
he's lying.
All right, story checks
If
out.
Lisa didn't vote for him and I didn't vote for him, then he's looking for an excuse.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, Ethan.
He treats Homer treats former President George Bush a lot like he treats Flanders, except that George Bush will actually stick up for himself.
Exactly. Yeah.
George
well,
Bush
and
and
we
Flanders
see
are very similar. And we see that
we see it very
established
early
in the
when
beginning,
when they come over.
But George Bush, World War II veteran, CIA operative, will fight back. And that's the only thing that keeps Homer from driving someone to suicide, the same way he did with Frank Grimes. So
Now, to keep things rolling a bit, the act ends with George Bush spanking Bart.
Yep.
Very mild spanking, but a spanking nonetheless. And then Homer getting very upset about this.
he spanked you?
Yeah.
You? Bart Simpson?
The child that I strangle every time I get mad, which is interesting. But I mean, obviously, like I think Homer's reasoning is he even says it like he wants to choose how to
Yeah.
discipline him.
It's his son. No one but Homer should be allowed to spank or strangle his own son.
Exactly.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's a free country. I thought this was America.
And I think that's an interesting idea of like maybe in '96. I don't know about about you guys' experience, and we don't want to get too deep into spanking or anything, but that idea of corporal punishment, whatever you want to call it, is pretty common with the previous generation, I'd say. My dad was into corporal punishment more so than my mother, but it wasn't as common these days, from my understanding. Again, I don't have kids, but
So we're not talking from anywhere of any place of actual
No, it's
research
definitely
here.
a phenomenon on the decline. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I think it is.
As an official, like a thing that you, even if you, I think, are still doing it, you wouldn't say, hey, I hit my kid all the time.
right, yeah, it's a little more behind the scenes.
Probably
yeah.
keep that on the down low.
Yeah.
A sack of
I'm trying to
oranges
remember,
type
Extra on
thing.
the
Did this episode come out before the Australia episode or after?
Is after.
It's after.
Yeah.
Okay. Because obviously there was this thing.
The whole thing about booting and
Yeah, the Singapore caning thing. Which
Right, yeah.
I was sort of riffing on, yeah.
It's just a little boot in the bum. It's okay.
But so this idea of him not only spanking him, in George Bush's mind, it seems like the right thing to do. But I think a lot of parents would probably say, no, only I can spank my child. And if anyone else does, that's like, I don't know, maybe a felony in some places.
Crossing a line.
They have a good little commentary on it where Grandpa says, and that's why your kids are running wild, and points to Lisa, and she's just quietly reading a book. It's wonderful.
Oh, it's brilliant.
That's why your no good kids are running wild.
She just smiles. She's just like, hi.
Yeah.
Incidentally, one of the all-time great Grover Cleveland references, too.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Let's not let that slide by.
If
Which-
Grover Cleveland is going to be represented in some sort of pop culture reference, I really hope it's about being spanked on 2 non-consecutive occasions by said Grover Cleveland.
Well, and the writer of this episode has said that that's a joke he uses all the time. He's used a non-consecutive Grover Cleveland joke in like all of the things he's ever done. I believe it's in the pilot of Futurama as well. So
I got to find that.
yeah.
Find that. It's the pilot of Futurama.
I don't know, man. You have to
Good luck, Greg.
go to a rummage sale and find it.
Sorry.
So we gotta move on to our next guest. Ife, do you have any? What's your favorite joke of the episode?
Yeah.
Probably the graffiti. It's so anticlimactic, where you're like, oh, here he goes, and then
I pulled a couple of pranks in my day.
he politely spray paints a sheet and then hangs it up
Yeah,
on his own
on
house.
his own house. Yep.
By the way,
And it's not
then
even
has to
like-
explain it, and takes the time to explain to the neighborhood people why those 2 people who you should know, who you should identify from his
Yes.
crude drawing, are the man and his boy. And he doesn't remember one of their names.
And it's not even like, you know, fuck these guys, just like 2 bad neighbors, like just so calm
Because that's
and like
the worst insult you
Yeah.
can think of. They're just.
I don't understand.
they're not
horrible
very
to live by.
nice. And it's like, oh boy, look out.
Are you saying you and Barbara are bad neighbors?
Oh, this boy.
I also love like this in that joke. I love the fact that that Bush doesn't know Homer's name. That just it's just so perfect. He's like, I don't know the name of the man. I
He
don't
hates
care.
him so much.
Yeah.
That's
All right.
that's a
Any
great
final
joke.
thoughts on the episode, there, sir?
Great episode. It's very rewatchable. Even though it's referencing people who are no longer culturally relevant, really, and dead, it's still fantastic. It's a wonderful, wonderful episode. I love it.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Ife.
me, guys.
We will talk to you later. All right. Our next and final guest of this evening. Wait a minute. That's a really nice hat.
Thanks.
Can I have it?
No.
Okay. Our final guest tonight.
The hell? What just happened?
Our final guest tonight is you know more of what he does. I know
Sure,
his
you may
name.
know him as the host of Woohoo Classic Simpsons Trivia here in YYC. You may know him as a trivia contestant at Quiz Shoe. You may also know him as a past and future guest of this here podcast, Adam Duhatschek.
Come on up, Adam. Take your time. We don't have anywhere to be.
Adam will be continuing the evening tonight by hosting trivia, so stick around for that.
That's right.
Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
You can move
my
that if
own
you want.
trivia show.
It's great to have you. Great to have you at your own trivia show.
That sounded so much meaner than I meant it to.
I think you meant it in a nice spirit.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a gentle ribbing.
All right. I will take it in the spirit in which it was given. You got me right in the side there. Very nice.
So, what are your thoughts about the episode as a whole, there, Adam?
The episode as a whole, it's great. It's one of the stronger episodes, and it's sort of a pillar in the argument that I've seen made on the internet before, but I'm going to claim it as original, that The Simpsons was really good at neutral political satire.
Right.
They made episodes funny for people regardless of their political leanings. This maybe skewers George Bush a little bit more than some of their others did, but they made fun of everybody in a time, I guess, when American politics was less insane and didn't have as many Nazis in it.
One of my favorite
Not as many.
jokes of The Simpsons. This is probably out of the golden era, but it's when Clinton is walking down the street playing the saxophone, and Moe says, "Hey, Clinton, get back to work." And Clinton just says, "Make me," and just starts playing the saxophone again. I think that's a really great little piece of satire, and we have both on either side. It's really, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Roasting the new guy. Love
Yeah,
it. And
gotta
I think
roast
that
the
is
new guy.
still golden era.
Yeah,
I believe it is, yeah.
The episode is... It's going to come to me later. It's going to drive me nuts until then.
Okay,
Good.
we'll just keep that bug
That's
in
what
your
we hope.
brain, slowly driving you
Fantastic.
mad.
Yes.
Much like knowing the Matrix is a thing.
Oh, I thought you meant the movie. I'm like, why does that? Oh,
No,
I
it's
get
a line
it. The
from
actual
Morpheus
Matrix.
says
yeah.
it anyway.
No, I understand.
Moving right along.
So this act is basically all about the feud between Homer and Bush.
This is Homer finally getting his excuse. He
Yes.
says there's going to be trouble, and there's definitely trouble.
For you.
Damn it. The first thing they do, 200 bottle rockets.
Yep.
It's a great idea.
Sure. I mean, it's set up as like, oh, because he's doing toe touches in front of his window. And then, like, immediately he's just, like, watching out the window. And he's like, damn, these bottle rockets. And I believe homage to the Iraq War. So,
Oh, yeah? Was there
Yeah.
a famous picture taken of him standing out there looking at the...
I haven't seen it.
I thought it was a homage to the American national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner.
Ah.
You know, the rockets, red glare, the bombs bursting in air.
No, I'm familiar.
Okay.
I'm actually trying to think though, because the whole thing with the first Iraq War, the way it kind of, I'd never thought of this before, but the way it kind of, introduced itself to the world was this nighttime airstrike.
Right.
I'm just thinking about the way they animated the bottle rockets going off. That might be.
They did.
This would be the kind of thing back in the day on the listserv or whatever the hell they used for.
Right, the
they would've
Usenet.
debated- Did they actually? Was it actually a reference?
Well,
to,
I listened to the commentary for this episode, and they said it is a reference to the
Did they?
Iraq
Okay.
War. So that's
So could this entire act and the rapid escalation of the fighting between the two sides of the street maybe be a extended metaphor for a mutually assured destruction of the Bush era that he made his name in, being the vice president during the Reagan era and all that sort of thing?
yes.
Okay. Well, that was
that's-
my academic thought. Moving right along.
Case closed, everybody.
All right.
Oh, and speaking
Told
of
you I don't want to
case-
get political on this podcast.
Speaking of cases being closed, one of our audience members has helpfully informed us through the magic of the internet that Clinton getting back to work is from Bart Gets an Elephant. So
Bart gets
Oh,
an
that's
elephant.
early in the golden
We've
age,
already seen it. Yes. Who was that? Thank
doesn't
you,
matter.
whoever it was. Thank
it was
you.
Alex.
That's Alex.
Appreciate it. Thank
Isn't that
you.
what we're all saying? Where's my answer?
I know I am. So bottle rockets, and then that's when, of course, the banner comes up.
Yeah.
Two bad neighbors, quickly taken down. Which I do want to mention is Harry Shearer doing an entire conversation all by himself. Hibbert and Ned and George Bush all talking to each other.
Just Terry Shearer, episode's MVP.
Yeah, great,
Quite
great guy.
obviously the episode MVP.
But then they do the Whig offensive,
Yes.
which
I think Ezra was mentioning that might be a reference to the Tet offensive, which
I mean, I think it's just a reference to the blank offensive,
Yeah.
which is a thing they use
Yeah.
in wartime, I believe.
could
I've
be.
never been.
The
I've
most
never been to war.
famous blank offensive is the Tet offensive, though.
Sure.
So who knows?
Yes, and Tet means head in French. Wig on the head. Hello. It is definitely a reference to the Tet offensive.
It is confirmed.
Thank you. Just
didn't
came
know
up with that.
Confirmed by sporadic applause.
That's right. Yeah,
That's
guy.
an
That's
excellent fact
that's
check.
democracy.
Yeah.
That's democracy.
He speaks French.
I do.
Yeah.
So I do love this part because they have the cutouts of George Bush Jr. and Jeb Bush,
Your sons.
your sons, which on the commentary they actually said as well that they weren't even thinking, because this is long before George W. Bush was, in politics, I believe, or at least like, I don't know, maybe he was a
He might have
governor
still
or
been an
whatever.
alcoholic.
What was
at
he,
this
governor?
point.
I think he
Yeah.
was the governor of Texas at
He
this
might have been a
point.
governor at this time. But anyway, like, no one really cared about him at this time. And so, like, in their minds, they had Homer call him George Bush Jr. because they assumed that Homer would assume he had a son named George Bush Jr. It's not actually a reference to George W. Bush in Homer's mind. He's just like, yeah, he's probably got a son named George Bush Jr.
But he definitely knows about Jeb.
He knows Jeb 100%. Yeah,
Because Jeb was supposed to be the president.
that's right. Many times.
I guess.
He hopes.
Yeah.
So
He wanted to be president.
Yeah.
Does
yeah,
that count?
No.
Well, yeah. No, it doesn't.
But then they put the wig on. I just love the fact that he cuts the wig.
Yeah.
Doesn't try and like cut it right at the he doesn't want to cut his hair.
No.
So he's like, I'll just shave the wig into a nice, pleasing form. Don't want it to be an afro. I want it to be a nice, short.
The audience of the Elks Club is one of my favorite things that I've
They
ever
all
seen.
want to know about the wig.
Yeah, they're just
They're waiting till the end. They're staring at him doing this, and it's like, are there any questions? Immediately,
Yeah.
all of them shoot their hands up.
keeping in mind.
I've already explained about the hair.
Keeping in mind.
Oh, right. Yeah, the Simpsons. Right.
Yeah.
So I also like the idea that in this speech, he probably opened it with, by the way, let me explain about my hair.
That was the opening. It,
Yeah.
of course, ends with him doing donuts on the front lawn of the Simpsons yard.
Yeah, I think he's lost.
He's not lost. He's not lost. That's one of my favorite lines.
Was that Marge? And she's like, maybe he's lost?
Yeah. And was just
Sweet, innocent Marge.
so sweet, so nice. And them going underneath the sewers, and Bart just has a box of locusts.
Oh, yeah.
He's
He's ready to
has
go.
the
He's a miscreant.
Locusts.
This ties in with Ife's theory about him being terrible.
Clearly, he's ordered them from a lab supply company.
Yeah.
It's very clearly.
Edmund Scientific Co., which is a real place, apparently.
that just make biblical plagues to have on hand.
Yes.
So you can throw them at former presidents?
That's their motto.
Okay. Biblical plagues on hand. So you
Throw
can
them at presidents.
Maybe that's their research. They want to test the effects of locusts on former presidents.
Yeah.
Maybe indeed.
George sees this. He says, if they think George Bush doesn't want to go in the sewer, they don't know George Bush.
It's very true. He was the
He was dirty.
director of Central
uh,
Intelligence. You
I
don't
bel-
get there without twing.
His political campaign was one of the dirtiest in history, I believe. So I think that's what that subtle dig is that he's a dirty man.
Is that the whole Lee Atwater thing?
I don't know.
Oh, is that the one where like the guy like it's a whole thing. I'm not going to
I
get
told
into
you
it.
no politics.
Yeah, we're not going to get into it.
He's a guy who made ads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it is the Atwater thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the Willie Horton ad was the most notorious of the Dirty Tricks campaign, or the sort of Dirty Pool campaign,
And that was like he was on like the furlough, and it's like he dies, and like there's
which
a
they
murder.
also reference in,
Yeah.
in Sideshow Bob Roberts, where
Yeah.
he's got
Right.
the revolving door.
Prison.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have their big fight, and then Gorbachev comes.
Did
For-
anybody know that was Mikhail Gorbachev when they first saw this episode?
No, I thought that was blood on his head.
I did too. I thought it was a stain of some kind.
Well,
maybe
I mean,
he
it kind
ate
of is.
chocolate ice cream.
a
or
birth
something.
stain.
So it was just a random Russian person.
Nothing gets chocolate out, and yeah, I thought it was a random Russian guy. Yeah, just a random Russian guy. I knew
No,
there was
but
a thing.
honestly, when I first saw this episode as a child, I honestly was like, why is there blood on that man's head and no one is saying anything? This is so weird. It was really the strangest thing until I knew who Gorbachev was. And I'm like, oh, it wasn't blood at all.
No, it's not. It's the birthmark.
I just came for warming of house.
And said, find you grappling with
Local off.
off.
one of my favorite lines in Russian ever. Apparently, does anybody know what he says?
I looked it
Russian?
up. There's kind of two
Yeah.
schools of thought. One is that he says, wait till my boss hears about this.
Yeah.
The other one is, well, we know who's boss around here.
Yeah, that's a funnier one.
Yeah, so that's after, he apologizes and shows weakness in front of the Russians.
Yeah. Which you're not supposed to do. You can't show weakness in front of the Russians,
No.
I guess, especially if you're a...
I also just love the moment where Bush is trying to explain things to Gorbachev because it sounds so ridiculous. But Mikhail, they put a wig on my head and my memoirs, and it's just like, what are you doing? You're insane.
He doesn't even finish the sentence about his memoirs
No.
before Barbara interrupts him and demands that he apologize.
Well, yeah, she's like, this has gone on far enough, and I think she's right. Like, this is insane.
That's
you have
kind of-
locusts in the sewer.
That's kind of a reference to her steeliness, I think.
Could
Well,
be.
I think that she's ultimately the authority in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when
You know who wears the pants in that relationship, dude?
well, when she runs out of
Thanks,
patience,
50s stand-up comic.
when she runs out of patience, she has no problem with putting George in his place, which is really nice.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a good place to leave his character on, completely like undermined.
Well,
which
and
is
the
fun.
last image of him angrily honking the horn to leave is my favorite. He's just like, let's get the hell out of here. And then, of course, we get Gerald Ford.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but these are both single-term presidents, right?
Yeah, he wasn't, because
Ford was like
Gerald Ford
half
was
a
never
term,
elected.
but yeah.
Yeah,
Ford,
he was.
Ford wasn't even a full term. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gerald Ford was promoted from vice president. Thank you, Nixon. And
And promoted to vice president from, I can't remember who.
from Spiro Agnew.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So he was
must
the
have
only
worked there or
president
something.
who served as vice president and president without ever being elected.
Which vice president do you think you are?
I don't care.
In a BuzzFeed quiz. I would get Al Gore.
Okay. You are hearing me talk. Gerald Ford comes in, and he's very much the antithesis of Bush. He is pretty much a Homer clone.
He's literally voiced by Dan.
Yeah.
Dan Castellaneta. We're on a first name basis.
And thank you. And they have that iconic trip
yeah.
where they both say dough.
Yeah. Because
Which
that's
was
who
it-
Gerald Ford was.
Well, and I honestly don't know. This was a huge thing when I was fairly young and you're first discovering Saturday Night Live as an institution. That like half of how Chevy Chase became a big star was by doing this really bad Gerald Ford
Pratfall.
impression. 2/3 of which was just pratfalls.
Yes.
Because I guess like
Well,
Gerald
famously,
Jerry Ford tripped once.
yeah, and ended up with everyone was like, "Oh, we got him. That's his thing now. He falls." And Chevy Chase is like, "Great, that's my thing now," and that's how I do impressions.
Saturday Night Live characters have many facets.
Yes.
Multi-dimensional, multi-layered
Well,
characters.
to bring it to this episode, the Dana Carvey impression of George H.W. Bush is where "not gonna do it" comes from, and he says that in this episode, or he says "not gonna happen," but that's supposed to be kind of a tie into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Adam,
yeah.
what's your favorite joke in the episode?
Ooh.
You knew this was coming, so
I know it. It was for effect. Shut up.
All right.
Anyway,
the effect was trying my patience. Anyway,
neat. Favorite joke was probably one that's been gone over already, which is Grover Cleveland spanking Abraham Simpson on 2 non-consecutive occasions.
perfect.
But I am actually really partial to the sort of finale and outro where Homer meets Gerald Ford because I find it oddly heartwarming.
That he made a new friend.
He did.
Yeah.
Who's exactly like him, who's drawn to look as much like him as possible. He still looks reasonably like Gerald Ford, but he's definitely like a Homer Simpsonized Gerald Ford.
Yeah.
Yes.
And just the way he delivers such simple concepts as enjoying football and nachos and beer, it just strikes the right chord with me. I don't know why.
Well, that's
I guess
beautiful.
I enjoy those things.
That is a beautiful sentiment, and I hope they were happy. I mean, they got that picture together that stays in the Simpsons house for long after this.
Long
It's
enough for
mentioned in
Frank
the-
Grimes to
yeah.
get upset about it, yes.
Yeah. Frank Grimes sees it and is baffled by it, as he should be. Anyway.
And any final thoughts,
Yeah.
Adam?
Thanks for doing a great podcast. Everybody stick around for trivia.
Great.
Yeah. Right on. Thanks,
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you so much. What
right.
time is it?
Don't worry about it. So we're gonna roll right through the reference test
what are we doing? Yeah, there we
real
go.
quick.
Reference test.
So Dream Police by Cheap Trick. Who sings that early on? The Ayatollahs. I mean, he lists 3 of them.
Ayahola.
Sure. He lists 3 of them. I don't want to talk about them.
Incidentally, because I've never looked this up, are they actual Ayatollahs?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We got a
One
thumbs
of-
up from Ife,
yeah,
who I
one-
know is the
one of my favorite
Ayatollah
jokes in
expert.
the episode is that Homer has this weird encyclopedic
Yes.
knowledge of Iranian internal religious politics. And they do it in a way that doesn't make it seem out of character somehow, which is amazing.
I love those moments where Homer has those moments of brilliance, I guess you could say, where he, like, it's with the Supreme Court justices as well. Like, he always, for some reason, knows all of the Supreme Court justices, and it's a nice little character thing. We got Big Spender, which is from the musical Sweet Charity, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that was from
So
musical.
musical nerds probably did. Of course, Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. So Homer says, I voted for Prell to go back to the glass bottle. That's a shampoo that apparently had an actual ad campaign where, because they were in a glass bottle originally, they went to a plastic bottle, and they actually had a thing where vote in if you want us to go back to the glass bottle, never intending to go back to the glass bottle. So that's why Homer's I've been deeply cynical ever since, because he voted for it to go back and it didn't happen.
And that's what causes voter apathy.
There you go. We got Bill Clinton roasting the new guy.
Yep.
Dennis the Menace. Charlton Heston is mentioned. Bob Mossbacker, which is a dumb name. He was the Secretary of Commerce, is what George was going to say before he's interrupted.
Random cabinet member.
I love it.
It's great.
Helmut Kohl, that's where he got the Alpine horn. Kennebunkport is apparently his hometown. George Bush's hometown.
Yeah, it's where they go and hang out.
Yeah. So there's the brief shot of his memoirs being shredded, and there's a freeze frame that Ezra will pull up for the live audience. It says Dan Quayle is an embarrassment.
VP
Quayle.
VP Quayle, an embarrassment.
So that's the only little sneak peek we get into his memoirs, aside from the passage he reads to us near the end there. Grover Cleveland, of course, 2 non-consecutive terms. The Elks Club, the George Bush Jr. and Jeb Bush. Edmund Scientific Co. The Locust, like I said, that's apparently a real place. Manuel Noriega, who is deposed as the leader of Panama, is who Barbara mentions at the end.
At the same time, a nemesis and an ally of the United States.
Exactly. Gorbachev, the Japanese banquet that Chris, of course, brought up earlier. He actually vomited on a Japanese prime minister, and that's hilarious. And then the tax hike. Notoriously, George Bush's platform.
No more taxes.
Read my lips. Yeah. And then he raises taxes.
Yep.
That's all I had for references. Let's talk about our favorite jokes.
Yeah, let's do it before we have to wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
Chris, you want to go first?
Well, we've already mentioned the Ayatollah stuff, so
Yeah.
I feel like we've covered my very favorite. I do think to come back to it, as an old man in this room who remembers seeing this for the first time when you had no idea it was going to turn into a recurring thing. The Disco Stew, that he has this jacket where he couldn't fit Disco Stud, and then this Disco Stew shows up at the time was just a killer joke.
Yes,
it was,
agreed.
And yes, it eventually turned into obnoxious zombie Simpsons beating a dead horse 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But at the time, and so I'll come back to that one and say Disco Stew. And the fact that Disco Stew, when he doesn't want the jacket, it's because Disco Stew
doesn't advertise.
Even
though he calls himself by his third name all the time, so he does advertise. Anyway. My favorite joke, so I just very briefly, boys, where you going is really funny to me. When his son's apparently floating in the sky, and that's his reaction is, where are you going? Just very sadly. But my favorite joke is the whole bit, and surprise, surprise, it's a Skinner thing. The whole bit was Skinner in the tie rack. I just love... It's such a Skinner thing. Now the ties are motionless, and... the ones in the back I can hardly see, and I only have one tie anyway, so it just progresses and then immediately comes back to buy it.
And then buys
the motor later. Oh, man, it's so good. Greg?
I'm not getting involved, George. I just think that's one of the funniest things in the world.
The whole Two Bad Neighbors bit.
The whole Two Bad Neighbors bit, I think, is one of the funniest jokes ever put on television, and just the whole idea of, I don't know the man's name. The boy's name is Bart. Barb, what's the name of the man? I'm not getting involved. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory, but I'll take the banner down.
He's so quick to give up. He's just fine. These 3 random people don't get it, and it's done.
Just instant over, moving on. That's it. It's a great joke, and Harry Shearer gives an amazing performance.
So I mentioned at the top of this we were going to do a quick Q&A. I only got one question on Twitter.
What was it?
Don't you hate pants?
I do hate pants.
Yes. I think we can all agree that pants should be banned.
Can't stand pants.
Can't stand pants.
Yeah.
That being said, if you obviously didn't check the email, so
I did check the email.
Oh, you did? Okay. Sorry.
I obviously did check the email.
Yeah, obviously.
And we didn't get any. So that means we can wrap this sucker up.
Yes, because we were running a bit late, and we do have to make way for Simpsons Trivia starting right away. I just want to thank everyone for coming sincerely. Thank you so much to Chris Turner for joining us today.
Thank you to all three of our guests, Ife, Adam, and Camille. And a special thanks to Dickens Pub for putting this whole thing on. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Ezra for running our sound and our media. Thank to everybody here. We really appreciate it. We hope you guys, if you're not familiar with this podcast, listen to us now that you've seen it. And hopefully we'll talk to you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Keep watching the ski.